So for those of you that follow this channel, yeah, the vehicle wrap video is just quite not ready yet. It's a little bit slow going between the weather and me getting sick. You probably have noticed I didn't release a video last week. I just haven't had the opportunity to fully finish it, but it is getting there. It's super close. I really just want to take my time and go through each section and make sure I'm doing it right because I don't want to waste material. So today we're going to do another one of those filler videos, just something to put out there until the wrap video is actually ready. But I found that a lot of you really respond and like these kind of videos where I'm showing a bunch of different products versus just reviewing one item. This is a video that's been on my list of videos to make for quite some time, so I figured now is the perfect time to do it. And it's basically just my collection of really random tools. I went around my garage and looked through my stuff for some of those tools that you normally won't find in a regular toolkit or in anyone's toolbox, but have come in really clutch in certain situations, or if not most situations. The thing is, unless you're a tool hoarder like me, some of you may not even know what some of these tools are, or even knew they existed. But after this video, hopefully you'll see something that you might want to add into your own toolbox. So let's just jump into it. So starting off with hand tools, something that's simple but not that unorthodox, and that is a mirror. You have no idea how many times I have dropped screws inside the engine bay, or sometimes I need to look at things underneath something and I just can't see it from any other angle, and having a mirror allows you to do that. Plus it extends, you can do your inspections, look for things. This is one of those things you need to get like right away. Speaking of dropping things in the engine bay, and also something that's not that unorthodox, an extendable magnet. Especially if you drop something and your hand just can't reach in there, it's just it's a tight space. This helps out with that. In fact, I've dropped socket wrenches and box wrenches inside, and this has been able to get it out of there. Again, something that you're gonna want to get like right away if you don't have one already. I have two, again, one in the garage and one in the vehicle. Speaking of magnets, this is a cool thing to have. This is from Craftsman. There's two slots here. One says magnetize and one says demagnetize. If you're, let's say, putting in a screw somewhere and you don't want to drop that screw, you can take your screwdriver or whatever and just magnetize it like this, and then that way your screw will stay, or your bolt will stay on the actual driver itself, and you'll be able to put it in there. And if you want to demagnetize, then you just put it up here. Very, very useful to have one of these to hold your screws in place when you're trying to maneuver it into something and you don't want it to drop. Now, one of my favorite tools, one that I use pretty much 80% of the time and wish I would have bought much sooner than I actually did, and that is the plastic rivet removal tool. If you're doing any kind of work on the vehicle, then you'll know that there's plastic rivets everywhere holding trim in place. And the old school way I used to do it, I used to just take a flathead screwdriver, kind of pry it out of there, or take basically a pair of pliers and try to pull it out of there, but then that gets really messy. There's no kind of leverage action, and then when you're pulling it with the pliers, it starts to bend the head of those plastic rivets. Well, this makes everything so fast and so clean. It's basically just drop that in there, and because there's this bend, you get a little bit of some leverage, and that'll help a lot. These are super cheap. If you don't have one already, get one, because you'll find that you use this like more than many of the other tools that you actually own. So since we're talking about tools that remove the plastic rivets to hold the trim in place, then the next logical step is for you to invest in tools that will actually remove the trim themselves. These are not very expensive, and you get an assortment of different plastic tools to remove basically any trim you might have. You don't want to use anything metal like a flathead screwdriver, because that could end up damaging the trim, cracking the plastic. If there's some paint underneath, you might end up scratching that. Get some plastic trim removal tools to make that cleaner. This one in particular I use a ton when I'm trying to remove the plastic trim that's inside my door. Anytime I need to pop it out, I use this one because there's a lot more surface area, it's wider. I do use the smaller ones though for smaller areas, things like this. This can also pop out plastic rivets because of this little divot here. And then one that I use a ton is the flat one. This one, you know, especially if you're trying to get that center console out, you can kind of use this to just jam in there and kind of work your way around the trim and get it out. If you're going to remove trim, you want to try to keep it looking good. good and not damage it. You want to use this to protect all of those surfaces. Speaking of leverage, get yourself a really good set of pry bars. Pry bars are so useful in basically taking apart things that have just become fused together, whether that's like by rust or by dirt, and you can WD-40 it all you want, but it just becomes really stubborn. When I was installing a new front axle on the Jeep, the original axle had fused itself to the transfer case, and I tried using a huge flathead screwdriver to get it out of there, and it just wouldn't move, which is why I bought these to begin with. I just took one of these, jammed it in there, and I was able to get enough leverage to kind of pop it out. So now we're delving into some of the more unorthodox tools. These are tools you don't have to buy right now, but when the job calls for it, spend extra money to buy these tools and then you'll never need it again. For example, a rubber hose removal tool. If you look in your engine bay, there are rubber hoses everywhere, and before I used to just grab it by the hand and try to pull it, and you don't want to do that because you could be stretching the rubber hoses out, or if they've become brittle, they might rip. Well, having these kind of pliers will help with that. You grip your hose from the stem and you're able to pull it out a lot easier and a lot cleaner. Retainer clip pliers. There are things in your vehicle that are held together with retainer clips. They look like flat little rings with little holes at the end, and they basically go into a groove somewhere and it stays there to prevent things from popping out like a pin. My Factor 55 winch hooks, in order for you to attach a rope to the hook, you gotta take the pin out, put the rope through, and then put the pin through the rope and through your winch hooks. But in order for the pin to not come out, you have to put a retainer clip in there. But you can't remove or add a retainer clip without one of these. If you look at the end of these, they look like needles, and they basically go into that retainer clip and the holes of that retainer clip, and you contract it like this and it'll contract the retainer clip and you're able to pull it out. And when you need to put it back in, you just drop it back in and let go like this, and then that'll expand that retainer clip and hold the pin in place. Step up drill bits. These are clutch, man. I always have to have these now. If you're doing any kind of mods where you need to punch a hole through metal, instead of you using different size drill bits and kind of moving up in size, and then the next thing you know, oh, that was too big of a hole now. Well, step up drill bits help in that regard, because you start small and then see if it fits, and if it doesn't, just keep going up and up until you have just the right size for whatever bolt that it is you're using. Having step up drill bits, always something good to have in your kit. And since we're talking about drilling, you need a punch. I don't know if any of you have ever had the rookie mistake of trying to get your drill and going into metal, and then that thing starts to slide everywhere. Unlike wood, it doesn't just stay in one place. With metal, it's gonna start sliding, and before you know it, you have these little tiny kind of snake-like things all over your metal, and it's just really messy because there's not a place for your drill to kind of anchor itself into, and that's where the punch comes in. A punch is really easy to use. You basically do it a couple of times, and what that does is it creates a divot inside that metal so that when you do use your drill, it'll basically stay in that same spot. Basically helps guide your drill bit and gets you drilling in the right direction without your drill sliding all over the place. All right, now this thing I was debating on whether or not to include in this video, because if I'm being honest, this has only worked for me like 20% of the time, and that is the Grabit Speedout. If you have any screws where the head of it has already just been grounded out and there's no way for you to extract that screw, you basically take this, because it will bore a new kind of groove in there for you to extract that screw out. But I think this has only worked for me like a couple of times. The other times the screw was so just dug in there already that this just wasn't gripping it enough to extract it, and I've just found myself being frustrated by this. And I have watched different videos, maybe I wasn't doing it right and I was doing what everybody else was doing, it just for some reason this hasn't always worked out for me. But having one just in case, you know, you could try it. You know, if you have one of those worn out damaged screws, try it and see if it works for you. And it has worked for me a couple of times, but for the most part, sometimes this doesn't always work. This is definitely one of those buy it when you need it. You don't need to buy it right away type things, and that's basically just a bottle pump. Bottle pump is helpful when you need to put fluids into certain areas so you just can't put a funnel in. Whenever I need to do my transmission fluid change or transfer fluid change, the holes for the inlet to put that new oil in is on like the side of the transmission, and there's no way you're gonna get like a funnel in there, so you definitely need to get one of these. It has a standard thread size for basically any bottle up here, so you basically just get your transfer case or your transmission fluid bottle and drop this in there, and then you're able to put this into the inlet and then just pump the liquid right in. Now, another one of my favorite tools that I use so often, that I would buy one if you don't have one already, get one like immediately, because you will definitely be using this. I do a lot of wiring on the vehicle, right? And sometimes I have to get wires through the firewall or through like a certain tunnel, and you try to get your wire through there. It's never gonna come out on the other side because it gets all wrapped up inside. You've probably tried using like a coat hanger or something like that. Well, this is like a coat hanger on steroids, because on the end of this you have this little kind of grippy thing. It reminds me of Spider-Man's Dr. Octopus. That's kind of what this looks like at the end. So you basically pull this through and have it come out on the other side of whatever tunnel it is that you're trying to get your wire through, and then open it up at the end, let it grip your wire, and then you're able to kind of pull it through a lot easier. If I drop a screw again in the engine bay and it's not one that a magnet will pick up, well, this has solved that issue. This is just so useful, and I've used this pretty much on almost every job because it always requires me to grab something that I just cannot reach with my own hands. One thing you need to know about me is that I really hate Allen keys, right? Like, I absolutely loathe them, and I know we can't get away from it because there's a lot of bolts out there that are hex bolts, and you're gonna need your Allen keys. You're sitting there turning and turning, and of course it just comes out, it comes flopping out of your hand. They do have the kinds that are like a bit and they go into a screwdriver and you do it that way. They even have the kinds that are like Swiss Army knives that just kind of come out and you kind of leverage it that way, but still, I just really hate Allen keys. And then one day I just went on Amazon to see if they had something like this, and I don't know why I would think they don't, because there's everything on Amazon. These are Allen key drill bits, and oh my god, they're awesome. It comes in both metric and in standard sizes. Now, if let's say I need to remove a bolt, I can use this to just kind of loosen it at first, and then you take your drill and you now have basically your Allen key that way, and now you can extract those bolts or put those bolts in much faster than sitting there with one of these just turning and turning and turning and turning. This will make that job so much faster. Now, this kit here, this is crucial. If you own a Jeep, you're definitely gonna want one of these, and even if you don't own a Jeep, you will probably want to get a set of these because you're gonna find that you will need them at some point. Now, this one is from a company called Lexavon, and what these are T-bits or star bits or whatever it is you might want to call it. They call it that because they're shaped like a star. I've had people comment on some of my install videos, most specifically like my front runner roof rack or my front runner ladder, and people have asked like, hey, what bits are you using to drive these bolts in, because I don't have any kind of bits that will fit in these bolts. That's because they're using like T-bits. And the reason why I say if you own a Jeep, you're gonna want a set of these is because Jeep loves using T-bolts. In fact, they even sell Jeep specific kits that will cover any T-bolt that you have in your vehicle. They'll have a bit for it. That's the kit that I have in the vehicle now. It'll basically cover all the T-bolts that I have on the Jeep. There'll be a bit for that. This will cover it too, but there might be some off bolts that this doesn't cover. Well, the Jeep specific kit ones will definitely have you covered in that area. Now, this kit here, this is also from Lexavon. I have no idea who they are. It's not like I work with them or anything, but I found that I really like a lot of the kits they have. I showed you my T-bit set. Well, this one is their solder soldering kit. I have bought so many different kind of soldering kits, solder irons, and I've never liked them. I realized that I don't like soldering irons. They take too long to heat up, and then they also take too long to heat up the wire, and then sometimes the ends of those gets really messed up with solder and you gotta clean it off, and it just gets all messy. Well, this is more like a blowtorch style of soldering. And this thing will heat up wire so quickly, and then you'll be able to get your solder on there and get it fused up. But if you do like the solder iron style, they do have a bunch of different attachments you can put at the end of it to make it like an iron. They even give you like this sponge in here that you could wet, and that way you can clean your irons in there. And then you also get this attachment here that basically turns this into like a heat gun. You can kind of put this together and you won't get any fire coming out of here, but you'll get a lot of heat. So if you need to do some kind of heat gun type of tasks, then you can definitely use this for that as well. I've not gone back to any of my soldering irons ever since I bought this. This just makes soldering wire so easy and so quickly. This is a pop rivet insertion tool. There are two basically kind of rivets, right? This is the one that a lot of you are probably familiar with. It's basically a plastic rivet that goes in somewhere, and then to tighten it, you push this little button, and that'll lock the rivet in place, and things won't pop off. And then when you need to remove that trim, you just pop this tab back out, and then you'll be able to remove this. But the other kind is one that's more permanent, and you'll find something like this on like Jeep fenders, right? If you look underneath your stock Jeep fenders, they use plastic pop rivets like this. And the way they come out is when you're ready to remove these, you pop the middle, you pop it through, and then you'll be able to take the rivet out, but you cannot reuse the rivet again. You have to replace it. And that's where this comes in. It's basically easy the way this thing works. You have this thin side here, and then you have a thick side there. The thin side goes into your tool like this. This gets tightened so that it won't go anywhere. And then you basically, what happens is if when you pull this apart, that will pull this thing through, and as it pulls that through, the other end, the fatter end, kind of compresses, and it basically attaches the two areas together, like your fender to your body, and it basically squishes it together and holds it in place. Then once you pull this like that, that cuts off any of the excess that's on the ends, and that excess just drops into here, and then you can empty out this reservoir when it gets filled. What you're left with is basically a nice, clean, permanent rivet that you can't remove unless you pop the middle out, and then you again have to replace it with a new one. But sometimes the permanent pop rivets are better than these ones because they stay, like they're not meant to come out again. Having something like this makes adding these much easier and simpler. Now this right here, this is probably one of the best investments I've ever made, and not because it's expensive, because it's really not, but it's just the amount of times you're going to use this versus how much you would spend to buy one of these. It may not be worth it, which is why a lot of my friends borrow this kit from me all the time. And what this is a Nutsert tool. What Nutserts are is it allows you to create a hole somewhere that is a threaded hole so that you can kind of put bolts through. This is useful when you are needing to mount something, but you can't get to the other side of the metal to put a nut on, so you have to use a Nutsert. In the 4Runner, in the engine bay, I had to install the aux beam switch pod, and I needed to mount the switch pod box somewhere on the wall of the engine bay. Well, obviously I can't get behind that wall to put a nut there, so I had to add some Nutserts. And a lot of times when you get a product that uses Nutserts, the company will send you like some DIY tool that you use to clamp these with, and that's where a lot of people are like, oh, I hate those things, because you basically create a hole, you put the nutsert in, and then you put that DIY tool in, and you have to use something to hold this nutsert in place while you kind of screw in a counterclockwise position with that tool. And what that does is it squishes this little thing at the end, and again, it clamps it down onto the metal, and now you have a hole that's threaded. Well, sitting there with that DIY tool can be a pain in the butt, it takes forever, and sometimes it comes out all crooked. And that's where this tool comes in. This has been the best thing, especially with me when I've needed to use a lot of nutserts on the vehicle. This allows me to put them in very easily. The way it basically works is there are different dies right here for the different sizes of nutserts that you might get. So this one in particular, I believe is a M3. So you take the die, and you take this die and you replace the one that's on here. You take your nutsert, just kind of screw it onto the die like this, and now it's going to be at the front of this like this, and you push it into the hole, and then it stays out like this. You push it into the hole, and then you clamp like that, and as you do that, that squishes this down, and once it's squished in there, you can try to tug it to make sure it's in there, and if it's not moving, then you know you're good. Then you basically just unscrew this out, and now that nutsert stays on the wall or whatever. Now you can bolt things through it. But that's it, just a sampling of some of my most random and unorthodox tools that I have here in the garage. Actually had a really good time making this video. It got me reacquainted with some of the tools that I forgot I had, the ones that have been sitting in the back of the drawer. Some of them I use constantly. Some of these you're gonna want to get right away because they make, like, they're just clutch in so many different situations, while others are the ones that you're probably gonna get when the need arises. You don't have to go rush out and grab one, but when the time comes that you need to get one, and then you'll never need it again. I know this is one of those filler kind of videos, but I'm really excited about some of the videos that are going to be coming out. One, my wrap video, I know that that's going to be awesome once I just finish this wrap, and I'm really hoping that it comes out next week. I'm really excited to film some off-road content too. I know a lot of you have been asking, like, where are your off-road videos? They're all like in the garage. Again, that's because we've been working on a film that we're submitting to the Overland Film Festival. We're actually going to be debuting it at the Southeast Adventure Vehicle Expo in Stark, Florida in a couple of weeks. I also have a review video for Anchor and also for Terran. And of course, we're going to have videos coming out of the Southeast Adventure Vehicle Expo. Lots and lots of exciting stuff. But if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you smash. Actually, don't smash. Stick a pop rivet in that like button. Subscribe to our channel. Also consider supporting us on Patreon because it gives you access to all of our videos before everyone else and gives you access to our live streams when we do them. Make sure you also click that notification bell so we can let you be aware of new videos when they come out. And as always, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Baptism Overland. My name is Asia Sampson, and I will see you next time.